Before we dive into today's incredible story of honor, redemption, and sacrifice, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like button if you enjoy tales from the Viking Age, subscribe to our channel for more amazing historical stories, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with our global community of history enthusiasts. The morning mist clung to the fjords like the breath of ancient spirits, and I, Thorstein of the northern cliffs, stood among the aftermath of what would be remembered as the Battle of the Three Rivers. The clash had been fierce but brief, ending not with the complete destruction we had anticipated, but with an unexpected moment that would haunt my thoughts for years to come. My battle-axe hung heavy in my grip, its iron blade still warm from the conflict. Around me, my fellow warriors tended to their wounds and gathered the spoils of victory, but my attention was fixed on the figure kneeling before me in the churned mud and trampled grass. The enemy warrior was young, perhaps no more than 20 winters, with the lean build of someone who had known hunger but possessed the determined eyes of a true fighter. His leather armor bore the marks of our encounter, a deep gash across the shoulder, mud caked into every crease, and the unmistakable look of defeat. Yet there was something in his bearing that spoke of nobility, a quiet dignity that even defeat could not diminish. "Your name, stranger," I commanded, my voice carrying the authority earned through countless battles across the northern seas. "I am called Olav," he replied, his accent marking him as one of the southern clans, those who dwelt near the great trading routes, son of Grim the shipwright. The name meant nothing to me then, but I would remember it always. Around us, the sounds of victory continued, my men calling to one another, the distant lowing of cattle being herded away, the splash of oars as our longships prepared for departure. The war between our clans had raged for 3 seasons, born from disputes over fishing rights and ancient grudges that no living man could fully recall. "You fought with courage," I admitted, studying the young warrior's face. There had been a moment during our personal combat when he could have struck a decisive blow, when my footing had faltered on the slick riverbank stones. Instead, he had hesitated, and that moment of uncertainty had cost him the fight. "Courage means little when it cannot protect those who depend on you," Olav replied, his gaze shifting toward the smoldering remains of what had been his clan's settlement. The structures were not destroyed. We were not destroyers of homes, but the defeat was absolute. His people would need to seek new lands or submit to new leadership. I found myself studying this young man more carefully. In his eyes I saw not hatred or the burning desire for revenge that I had grown accustomed to seeing in defeated enemies. Instead, there was a profound sadness, the weight of responsibility unfulfilled. It reminded me uncomfortably of my own expression in the still waters of mountain pools during my own youth, when the responsibilities of leadership first settled upon my shoulders. "Your clan fought honorably," I said, surprising myself with the words. "There is no shame in this defeat. Honor does not fill empty bellies or rebuild burned granaries," Olaf responded, but without bitterness. "My people will scatter to the winds, seeking kinship from distant cousins or mercy from strangers." The weight of his words settled between us like a stone dropped into still water. Around us, the celebration of victory continued, but I found myself disconnected from it, caught in an unexpected moment of reflection. This young warrior bore the same burden I carried, the responsibility for the welfare of others, the weight of decisions that affected not just oneself, but entire communities. "Stand," I commanded, extending my hand. Olaf looked at the offered assistance with surprise, then clasped my forearm in the traditional grip of warriors. As I pulled him to his feet, I made a decision that would echo through the years to come, though I could not have known it then. "The war between our clans ends here," I declared, my voice carrying across the battlefield. "Let word go forth to all corners of the north. The feud is finished. Your people may go in peace, and any who wish may seek sanctuary in our lands, provided they swear the proper oaths." My own warriors looked surprised by this pronouncement. We had won completely. Tradition demanded that we press our advantage, take everything of value, and scatter our enemies so thoroughly they could never again pose a threat. But something about this young warrior's dignity in defeat, his concern for his people rather than his own fate, had touched something deep within my warrior's heart. "I do not understand," Olaf said quietly, confusion evident in his voice. "You have won everything. Why show mercy to those who raised swords against you?" "Because," I replied, surprising myself with the honesty of my response, "I see in you the same burden I carry. You fought not for glory or gold, but for the protection of your people. That is a motivation I respect, even in an enemy." The young warrior's eyes widened slightly at this admission. For a long moment, we stood facing each other, while the sounds of the post-battle activities continued around us. Then slowly, Olaf knelt again, but this time it was not in defeat. "I swear by the sacred oaths of my ancestors that neither I nor any who call me kin will raise weapons against you or yours," he said formally. "This debt of honor shall not be forgotten." "Rise, Olaf, son of Grim," I commanded. "Go to your people, tell them they have 3 days to gather what possessions they can carry. After that, any who wish may journey north to our lands. We have need of skilled shipwrights and those who know the southern trading routes." As the young warrior departed, walking with as much dignity as any victorious champion, several of my closest advisors approached me with expressions of concern. "Thorstein," said my old friend Gunnar, whose beard had grown white in service to our clan, "this mercy may be seen as weakness. Other enemies may think we have grown soft." "Let them think what they will," I replied, watching Olaf's retreating figure disappear into the morning mist. "A warrior who cannot show mercy when victory is complete is no warrior at all, but merely a beast with a blade." The following days passed in a blur of activity. True to my word, I allowed the defeated clan to depart in peace, and several dozen chose to journey north with us, including skilled craftsmen and traders whose knowledge would prove valuable in the years to come. Olav himself bid farewell at the crossroads, choosing to seek his fortune in distant lands rather than accept the charity of his former enemy. "I go to find my own path," he explained when we parted. "Perhaps the All-Father has different plans for my fate than I imagined." "May the winds favor your journey," I replied, and meant it. As our longships carried us home through the familiar fjords, I found myself thinking often of that moment of decision. Leadership, I had learned through hard experience, consisted largely of such moments, instants when the choice made would ripple outward through time like stones cast into water. Some decisions brought immediate consequences, others revealed their true significance only after seasons or years had passed. The homecoming was everything one could wish for. Our families greeted us with joy, our success was celebrated with great feasts, and the spoils of war were distributed fairly among all who had served. My wife, Astrid, listened to the tale of the battle with the keen attention she brought to all matters of importance, but I could see questions in her eyes. "You spoke truly when you showed mercy to this young warrior," she said, as we walked along the cliffs above our settlement that evening. "But I sense there is more to this story than mere compassion for a defeated enemy." "Perhaps," I admitted, "there was something about him, a quality I respected. He fought not for personal glory, but for the protection of others. It seemed familiar." Astrid smiled, that knowing expression she wore when she understood something I had not yet fully grasped myself. "You saw yourself in him." "Perhaps I did. The seasons turned as they always do. The harvest that year was abundant, the winter mild, and by spring our settlement had grown considerably with the addition of those who had chosen to join us from the defeated clan. The newcomers integrated well, bringing skills and knowledge that benefited everyone. The southern trading routes they knew proved particularly valuable, opening new opportunities for prosperity. Yet through all these good times, I found myself occasionally wondering about Olav's fate. Had he found the new path he sought? Had he established himself somewhere, perhaps even started a family of his own? The questions would surface unexpectedly, during quiet moments in council meetings, while walking the familiar paths of my childhood, or in the still hours before dawn when sleep eluded me. 2 full years passed before I received any word of him. A traveling merchant, one of those hardy souls who brave the dangers of distant roads to bring news along with their goods, mentioned encountering a young warrior of great skill who had established himself as a protector of trade routes in the Eastern Territories. "Goes by the name of Olaf," the merchant said over our evening meal. "Honest as the day is long and fierce as a storm at sea when bandits threaten honest folk. Made quite a reputation for himself, he has." The news brought me an unexpected sense of satisfaction. The young warrior had indeed found his path, and it appeared to be an honorable one. The debt between us, if it had ever truly existed, was balanced. Our paths had crossed briefly, we had each acted according to our nature, and now we lived our separate lives with honor intact. Or so I believed. It was early in the 3rd year following our encounter that my son, Anders, came into the world. The birth was difficult, and for hours I paced outside our dwelling while the women attended to Astrid, praying to any gods who might listen that both mother and child would survive the ordeal. When the infant's first cry finally pierced the air, I felt a relief so profound that my knees nearly buckled. Anders was a healthy child, strong of limb and loud of voice, with his mother's bright eyes and what Astrid claimed was my stubborn disposition. From his earliest days, it was clear he possessed an insatiable curiosity about the world around him. As soon as he could walk steadily, he began exploring every corner of our settlement, making friends with the craftsmen, listening to the stories of the old warriors, and showing an early fascination with the boats in our harbour. "He has the heart of an explorer," Astrid observed one evening, as we watched our son attempt to climb into one of the smaller vessels moored at our dock. "Mark my words, Thorstein, this one will not be content to spend his days within sight of home. Then we must teach him wisdom to go with his courage," I replied, scooping up the adventurous child before he could tumble into the cold fjord water. "The world beyond these cliffs can be dangerous for those who venture forth unprepared." Little did I know how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how soon the dangerous world would venture forth to find us instead. 5 years had passed since that misty morning when I showed mercy to a defeated enemy, and our settlement had grown into something approaching a small town. The peace that followed the Battle of the 3 Rivers had brought unexpected prosperity to our lands. Trade flourished, our herds multiplied, and children played in safety along shores that had once known only the sounds of preparation for war. My son Anders, now 4 winters old, had grown into a curious and bold child who knew every path through our settlement and could name most of the adult inhabitants by sight. He possessed an infectious laugh that could brighten even the gloomiest winter day, and a fearless nature that both filled me with pride and kept me awake at night with worry. On the morning that would change everything, Anders had convinced his mother to let him help with the early fishing, a task that mainly consisted of him getting in the way of the actual fishermen while asking an endless stream of questions about boats, nets, and the mysterious creatures that lived beneath the dark waters of the fjord. I was in the great hall, meeting with the village elders about preparations for the upcoming harvest festival, when young Eriksson burst through the heavy wooden doors with the wild look of a man who had seen his own death approaching. "Ships!" he gasped, struggling to catch his breath after what must have been a desperate run from the watchtower on the southern point. "Foreign ships, flying no banners we recognize, moving fast up the fjord." The hall fell silent except for the crackling of the central fire. In the space of a heartbeat, the comfortable concerns of festival planning and trade agreements vanished, replaced by the cold reality that our peaceful years might be coming to an abrupt end. "How many?" I asked, already rising from my chair and reaching for the war horn that hung beside my seat. 6 vessels, Eriksson replied, his breathing beginning to steady. "Long ships, but built differently from ours, low in the water, like they're carrying many men." "Raiders," growled old Gunnar, his scarred hand instinctively moving to where his sword would hang if we were not in peacetime council. "Been too quiet too long. Words gotten out about our prosperity." I nodded grimly. Prosperity, while a blessing, had an unfortunate tendency to attract the wrong kind of attention. Other clans and tribes, struggling with poor harvests or internal conflicts, might see our success as an opportunity to solve their own problems through violence. "Sound the warning," I commanded, and the deep, resonant call of the war horn soon echoed across the settlement. Immediately, the carefully rehearsed emergency preparations began to unfold. Women and children moved toward the reinforced buildings at the settlement's heart, while men grabbed weapons and moved to predetermined defensive positions. But even as I organized our defenses, a part of my mind was calculating odds and probabilities, and I didn't like the results. 6 longships could carry between 200 and 300 warriors, depending on their size and loading. Our settlement, while prosperous, was primarily composed of farmers, fishermen, and craftsmen. We could field perhaps 60 fighters, many of them older men whose warrior days were supposedly behind them. "Where is Anders?" I asked Astrid as she passed by, leading a group of women toward the central stronghold. "At the docks with the fishing boats," she replied, her face pale but composed. "I sent Olga to fetch him." I nodded, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. The fishing docks were among the most exposed positions in our settlement, offering little cover and no easy escape route if the raiders managed to make landfall there. But Anders was quick and clever, and Olga was one of our most reliable women. They would make it to safety, or so I told myself. The foreign ships appeared around the bend in the fjord with shocking speed, their sails full of wind and their oars beating the water in perfect unison. These were not desperate refugees or opportunistic bandits, but professional warriors operating with military precision. The lead vessel flew a banner I didn't recognize, a black raven on a blood-red field. "Mercenaries!" Gunnar spat, squinting at the approaching fleet. "Hired swords from the eastern lands, most likely. Someone's paid good silver to see us humbled." The possibility that this attack was not random but deliberate made the situation even more dangerous. Random raiders might be satisfied with easily portable wealth and a few captives. Professional mercenaries, paid to accomplish a specific goal, would be far more thorough and much more difficult to deter. As the ships drew closer, I could see the glint of weapons and armor among the crowded figures on their decks. These men were well-equipped and disciplined, moving with the coordinated efficiency of a force that had worked together before. The lead ship began angling toward our main dock, while the others spread out to prevent any escape by sea. "Torstein!" The cry came from behind me, and I turned to see Olga running toward our position, her face flushed with effort and fear. "The boy, Anders, he hid when he saw the ships coming. I couldn't find him." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Where did he hide?" "Somewhere near the docks," she gasped. "You know how he is, always finding little spaces where adults cannot follow." I searched, but the ships were coming so fast. Without conscious thought, I found myself running toward the waterfront, my spear in hand and my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, I heard Gunnar shouting orders and the sound of weapons being readied, but all of that seemed distant and unimportant compared to the single, overwhelming need to find my son. The main dock was chaos. Our own boats, caught in the middle of their morning activities, were scrambling to either reach shore or flee to open water. The first of the raider vessels was already close enough that I could see individual faces among the warriors crowding its deck. Hard, weathered faces marked by scars and painted with designs meant to inspire terror. "Anders!" I called, hoping my voice would carry over the noise of shouting men and creaking wood. "Anders, where are you?" A small sound, barely audible above the commotion, reached my ears from the direction of the boat sheds. I followed it, praying to every god whose name I knew that I would find my son safe and unharmed. I found him crouched behind a stack of fishing nets in the space between 2 overturned boats, his small body pressed against the wooden hull, and his eyes wide with the kind of fear that only children can experience. The fear that comes from understanding that something is terribly wrong without comprehending exactly what or why. "Papa," he whispered as I dropped to my knees beside him. The bad men are coming in their big boats. I tried to hide like you taught me, but I'm scared." "You did exactly right," I assured him, gathering him into my arms and feeling the rapid beating of his small heart against my chest. "You're brave and clever, just like your mama said. Now we need to get you to the safe place with the other women and children." But even as I spoke these reassuring words, I knew we might already be too late. The sound of boots on wooden planking announced that the first raiders had reached the docks, and voices speaking in unfamiliar tongues carried clearly across the water. Between our position and the central stronghold lay open ground that would offer no concealment. "Stay very quiet," I whispered to Anders, "and stay close to Papa. We're going to walk very carefully back to where Mama is waiting." We had made it perhaps halfway to relative safety when the shout went up behind us. Someone among the raiders had spotted movement, and suddenly the air was filled with the sound of running feet and harsh voices calling to one another. I broke into a run, carrying Anders and hoping desperately that we could reach the defensive line before the pursuit caught up with us. We almost made it. The first arrow struck the ground just ahead of us, its iron point burying itself deep in the earth with a solid thunk that spoke of powerful bows and skilled archers. I zigzagged, trying to present a more difficult target while maintaining my grip on my son, who had gone very still and quiet in my arms. "Almost there," I gasped, seeing our own warriors ahead, their shields raised and their weapons ready. "Just a little further." That was when the second arrow took me in the left shoulder, spinning me halfway around and nearly causing me to drop Anders. Pain exploded through my body like liquid fire, but I kept moving, stumbling toward the safety that seemed so close and yet impossibly far away. The third arrow never came. Instead, I heard the distinctive sound of steel meeting steel, followed by a cry of pain that definitely came from one of our pursuers, rather than any of our people. Risking a glance over my shoulder, I saw something that made me doubt my own eyes. A lone warrior had appeared between us and the raiders, moving with deadly efficiency among their scattered formation. His sword work was spectacular, not the brutal hacking of a berserker, but the precise, economical movements of someone who had spent years perfecting his craft. In the space of a few heartbeats, he had disabled 3 attackers and was engaging a 4th, with movements so fluid they seemed almost like a deadly dance. But it was not his skill that shocked me most. It was his face. Olav, son of Grim the shipwright, had returned. The young warrior I had spared 5 years ago was now a man in his prime, broader in the shoulder and bearing the confidence that comes with tested experience. His hair was longer now, braided in the manner of the Eastern clans, and his equipment was of noticeably higher quality than what he had worn during our first encounter. But there was no mistaking those determined eyes or the particular way he held his sword. "Go!" he shouted without looking in my direction, his attention focused entirely on the enemies surrounding him. "Get the boy to safety!" I didn't need to be told twice. Clutching Anders tightly, I covered the remaining distance to our defensive line, where eager hands reached out to pull us both behind the barrier of shields and spear points. As soon as I was certain my son was safe, I turned back to watch the impossible scene unfolding near the docks. Olav was facing overwhelming odds, with the kind of casual competence that suggested he had been in similar situations many times before. But even the most skilled warrior cannot fight indefinitely against multiple opponents, and more raiders were moving to surround him with each passing moment. "We have to help him," I said, starting to move back toward the fighting despite the arrow shaft still protruding from my shoulder. "You're wounded," Gunnar replied, catching my arm with his iron grip. "And he's already—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Even as we watched, the circle of enemies tightened around the lone warrior. Olav's sword continued to weave its deadly patterns, but there were simply too many opponents pressing in from all sides. The end, when it came, was both heroic and tragic. Surrounded completely, with no hope of escape or victory, Olav made one final desperate charge toward the largest group of enemies. His battle cry echoed across the water as he broke through their line, But the effort cost him everything. Multiple blades found their mark, and the warrior who had appeared from nowhere to save my son fell to the wooden planks of the dock, his sword still clutched in his hand. The sight of their comrade's sacrifice seemed to inspire something primal and fierce in our own defenders. With a roar that shook the very ground, our warriors charged forward, no longer content to wait behind defensive barriers. The raiders, caught off guard by this sudden reversal, found themselves pressed hard by men fighting not just for their homes and families, but for the honor of a brave enemy who had died protecting what they held dear. The battle that followed was brief, but decisive. The raiders, professional though they were, had not expected to face such determined resistance, and the loss of momentum proved costly. Within the span of an hour, those who had not fallen were retreating toward their ships, leaving behind their wounded and much of their equipment. But victory felt hollow as I knelt beside Olav's still form on the blood-stained dock. The young warrior's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, and his life's blood was steadily seeping through the gaps in his armor. Around us, the sounds of celebration began to rise as our people realized the threat had passed. But all I could focus on was the face of the man who had repaid my long-ago mercy with the ultimate sacrifice. "Why?" I asked quietly, not really expecting an answer from someone who was clearly beyond hearing. "Why did you come back?" To my surprise, his eyes opened, focusing on my face with obvious effort. "Debt of honor," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the sounds of the aftermath. "Swore, would not forget. You owed me nothing," I replied, feeling tears I had not expected beginning to blur my vision. "I spared your life because you deserved it, not because I expected payment." A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. "That is why it needed to be repaid." Those were his last words. As the sun reached its zenith above the fjord, Olaf, son of Grim the shipwright, died as he had lived, with honor intact and his duty fulfilled. The years that followed brought many changes to our settlement. We grew stronger and more prosperous, the memory of that terrible day serving as a reminder that peace must always be guarded by those willing to fight for it. The story of Olaf's sacrifice became part of our oral tradition, told and retold around winter fires as an example of how honor transcends the boundaries between friend and enemy. Anders grew into a fine young man, brave and curious as his mother had predicted, but tempered with a deep respect for the price that others had paid for his safety. On his 16th birthday, I gave him Olaf's sword, which we had recovered from the dock and carefully maintained through the years. "This blade was carried by a hero," I told him, as he accepted the weapon with the solemnity appropriate to such a moment. Not because he won great victories or accumulated vast wealth, but because he understood that true strength lies in protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even at the cost of one's own life. "I will carry it with honor, Father," Anders replied, and I knew that he would. Sometimes, when the evening light slants just so across the fjord, I find myself thinking about that moment of mercy so many years ago and the chain of events that flowed from it. A single decision, made in an instant of compassion, had rippled forward through time to save the life of my son and perhaps the future of our entire community. In the end, that may be the most important lesson of all, that mercy, like honor, creates debts that echo through generations, binding us all together in ways we cannot foresee or fully understand. The young warrior I spared became the guardian who saved my son, proving that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through strength of arms, but through strength of character. The fjord remembers, as it remembers all things. And in its memory, the story of two warriors, one who chose mercy and one who chose sacrifice, lives on as a testament to the honor that can exist even in the midst of conflict, and the bonds that connect us all across the boundaries of clan, time, and even death itself. Thank you for watching this tale of honor and sacrifice from the Viking Age. If this story moved you, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible historical narratives. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and share your thoughts about the themes of mercy and honor in this story. Until next time, may your own journeys be filled with courage and wisdom.